to the Good Warfare Communications Broadcast Network. I'm your host, Wes Mullins, and this is Everyday Apologetics. This is a no logical fallacy zone. This is a check your presuppositions and self-refuting statements at the door zone. So open your mind and open your hearts, and let us reason together.
Hey everybody, this is Wes Mullins, coming to you live tonight from Nicholasville, Kentucky. Got a lot of things to talk about. A lot has happened since I've last talked to you. It has been several months since the last podcast. And the reason for that, one was I and my family and I were in Nepal. We do a photography workshop in Nepal. It is philanthropy and photography. So we have business classes, and then we have classes talking about poverty and philanthropic things that you can do. So once you achieve success, what do you do with it? It actually was an amazing time. And then get back and, well, life. But more than that, I'd like to do a podcast when I have something to say. I know the Bible talks about that a fool speaks because he has to say something, but a wise man speaks because he has something to say. Many nights I've sat down here in front of my computer with my microphone, and I've wanted to say some things. I haven't for a couple of reasons. One is because sometimes it's really hard to put your thoughts together to make it make sense to other people. Why? Because you're wrestling through thoughts. You're wrestling through to make sure that you understand what you're saying. You don't want to throw gasoline onto the fire when you can throw sand or water on a fire that needs to be put out. So we have these issues where you don't want to move at the speed of social media. Because here's what's going to happen. I'll talk about this a little bit later too, I think, if I don't discuss it all now. But when we get into social media and the speed of social media, we think that we need a quick, sarcastic, which means which means to cut. We need this cutting quip, this cutting post, this cutting hashtag. We need our posts to just knife through the competition and leave them bloodied and beaten, and then the issue is over. No, it's not. The issue is not over just because you were witty or you were smart or the other person didn't have a comeback. Case in point, if we look at the abortion issue, up until Roe v. Wade, abortion was illegal. Which I have this question. I have this question for all my liberal friends, for all my progressive friends who say, Christians, you need to stop talking about abortion and how that it's illegal and it's immoral. Or it's immoral, I'm sorry. Let me reframe that for you. What I hear from my progressive friends and liberals is, stop talking about abortion. It's legal. You can't do anything about it, so stop protesting it. Really? What makes it moral now? And the answer is, well, it's legal. The Supreme Court has said it's legal, so it's moral. You need to stop it and quit it because it's a law, and you need to face it that it's a law. And I'm going to flip it on you. You should not try to push through this abortion issue because it's illegal. The courts have ruled on it. It's a law that you cannot abort a child. Therefore, it is immoral to do so, and to have a worldview that is contradictory to the law is immoral. So why would you therefore try to change a law that sets the moral standard? They framed the same thing with Obamacare. Well, it's the law now. We can't fight it. Sorry, it's over. It's the law. You've lost. It's now. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you think about Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. It doesn't matter what you think about it, because now Now it's a law. It's over. You've lost. Once you've lost, you've lost. You went to the Supreme Court, you've lost. Just because a law is passed and it goes to the Supreme Court and it shows that it's a law, doesn't mean that there can't be something called judicial activism, where justices will go in and not do their job per se, because the job of the Supreme Court is to say whether a law as it's written is constitutional or unconstitutional. It is not their purview to go in and say, well, the law was written as such, but the legislators meant to say this, or to look at Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act in itself, and say, well, it actually can be looked at as a tax. It wasn't presented as a tax. Actually, it was said that this is not a tax, and it should not be looked at as a tax. So how can the Supreme Court justices say, if we look at this as a tax, it's constitutional, when it was presented as, no, it cannot be a tax. It should not be looked at this way. So what we have is, in this social media stuff, and we have all this liberal progressivism coming out, what we have is so many ideas and so many philosophies flowing out there that it cannot possibly, all of it cannot possibly be true. So what do? How do we bridge this gap? How do we go through and just take this? Well, the first thing we have to realize is, in the era of social media and Google and Yahoo News, and in the event of the creation of the internet, you can't break the internet. Doesn't weigh anything. Those of you that know the IT crowd, the internet gods know who I am. Once the internet came available and you could just put anything out there, when they created Wikipedia, it was the downfall of Western civilization. I mean, who in their right mind thought Wikipedia was a good idea? And I know why Wikipedia is there. Wikipedia is there because the progressive idea is that white, Eurocentric, European descendants, white privileged academics have written all the textbooks, they've written all the dictionaries, they've written all the Britannica encyclopedias, and therefore everything inside of those encyclopedias is inherently racist, is white privileged, and is written in a prescriptive way, which is written in the way things ought to be. There is an ought implied into these things. This is the information as it ought to be. Whereas a progressive would say, well, why not let everybody write the dictionary? Why not let everybody write the encyclopedia? And then, therefore, we can get all sides. Well, the problem is I can go in and change anything I want. And I understand the heart of people, and that all men are bent towards something that is not upright, that is not righteous. We all have sinned, and we all, Paul says it like this. Paul says it like this. He says, every man's mouth, every person's mouth will be shut, and they will be guilty before the Lord. Because even if they create a law for themselves, they will invariably have failed and been guilty. Now, those of you that don't think that's true, let's just take the tolerance movement, okay? Let's take the tolerance movement. Let's take relativism. Let's take relativism on its face value. Moral relativism, I'll get it here in a second, says each person has autonomy over their own morals to declare what is right and wrong for them. Okay? What happens when a person says, you're wrong? When someone looks at a moral relativist and says, you're wrong, what happens is their worldview falls apart. But more than that, I have atheist friends who reject Judeo-Christian values, reject the Ten Commandments, reject Judeo-Christian morality, and they say, I will create my own morals. Okay, what are your ethics? What are your morals? What are your standards? Tell me. Well, my morals are to be honest. My morals are to be open with people and not lie, and I don't want to cheat or steal. I don't want to kill anybody. I don't want to eat cows because I think cow is murder, or eating cattle is murder, and killing cattle for food is murder. And so I don't want to, and they lay out this long laundry list of things, which most of them will actually correspond with the Ten Commandments, because Paul and Jesus both talk about the Ten Commandments, and John, and they all talk about this, and they say the Ten Commandments, and Jesus says the Ten Commandments and all the prophets can be boiled down to two things, two commandments. One, that you love God, and two, that you love your neighbor as yourself. And that's what it all hinges upon, loving God and loving your neighbor. And that essentially is what the moral relativist tries to reach, but they put this together. They reject Christianity and they reject the Judeo-Christian model, and they say, we're going to have our own moral compass. I recently had someone say, I'm morally good. I don't need God. I don't need God to be my moral compass because I'm morally good in myself. Okay, what are your ethics? What are your morals? What are your standards? Well, it's to be honest with people. Okay, have you ever lied? Have you ever been dishonest? Have you ever gossiped? Have you ever talked about someone behind their back? Have you ever broken and violated your own conscience? And have you ever violated your own mind? Have you ever tricked yourself? Rationalized something you knew to be false, but in your mind you rationalized it to be true to get something that you desired. Those things are all dishonest. You have violated your own ethics. Why would you create, if you have this autonomy, why would you take that opportunity to create a standard that you know you can't keep? And now, once you have committed the atrocities and you have violated your conscience, you've violated your own ethics, where do you turn? What is there? Oh, I can't trust you. I can't trust you to create a moral ethical code that you yourself will be able to keep. How can I trust you to judge anything? You have lost all credibility. If you are a moral relativist and you have ever lied to yourself to get your own selfish desires, how can I trust you to run government? How can I trust you to run my healthcare? How can I trust you to run my life? I can't. Why? Because you're not trustworthy. You have proven that you can't even be trusted by your own self, that you cannot even, given autonomy over yourself, you have fallen. But you know what? The Apostle Paul talked about that 2,000 years ago, in about 50 AD. He said that if you make a law unto yourself, that's fine. You don't want to use the Ten Commandments? Don't. That's fine. Because those people that have the commandments, those commandments will smite the heart, and the letter killeth, but the spirit maketh alive. He says that I wouldn't have known what sin was until I read the commandments. It says, love God, don't steal, don't kill, don't commit adultery, don't covet. When I read those things, I was smote in my heart because I was guilty of these. I disobeyed my parents. I did these things, and so it was smote in my heart, and it brought conviction. He says, that's fine if you want to be a law unto yourself. You don't have the Ten Commandments, you'll create your own law. And guess what? You'll fail. Because even with the law God created, we failed. So the moral relativist thinks they think they get away with this. They think they pull the wool over God's eyes. They're what we call metaphysical pugilists. You guys know what a pugilist is? It's a fighter. So they're metaphysical pugilists. They put their fist up to God and they box at the air and they box the wind and say, ha, I beat you. I've created my own moral codes. And all God has to simply say is, yeah, but did you keep it? But did you keep it? And the answer is a resounding nuh-uh. Why? Because we're all bent. We are all bent to dishonesty, to selfishness, to greed. Yes, we have the capacity for good. We have the capacity for good. That's the thing. So we have this vessel that has the capacity to do good, yet our vehicle is bent. You know, our altimeter don't work. You know, there's something about us that's askew. Yeah, we have capacity to do the right things. We have capacity for social justice. We have the capacity to take care of things and to do the right thing. But that vessel that has that capacity is bent. It means our front end, not aligned. And it pulls to the left a lot, or it pulls to the right a lot. And so we're constantly fighting the wheel to pull it back, and sometimes we lose that battle. Where do you go? For my moral relativist, where do you go? You've created a moral code in which you think people who lie, cheat, steal are bad people. How then do you judge yourself when you lie, cheat, and steal and violate your own conscience? You, by your own admission, by your own moral code, have indicted yourself as a bad person. See, there's this thing that you can't escape God. God's big enough. They tried, so they have all these freedom from religion foundation. You have this freedom from religion people. Yeah, freedom from religion, freedom from religion. And they're militant, man. They're going after it. We're going to eradicate God from America and set America free. You know what? They've done that across the world. They have squished God out. Stalin did it. Mao did it. They created freedom from religion utopias. Atheism was the state religion, the state philosophy in communism. Atheism in Russia, in the USSR, which that's the United Soviet Socialist Republic or Socialist Soviet Republic. I got that one way or the other. Atheism was the philosophy, and that was all that was allowed. Religion was not allowed to play a part in anything that was public, in public display of any kind. Forbidden, illegal. Guess what? People still became Christian. People were still Christian. God still moved. And communism fell. And now God is back in Russia. God is in China. It's the fastest growing church in the entire world. That doesn't mean anything other than God is moving. It doesn't mean that their philosophies are right. It doesn't mean it just shows that you can't squash God. And for those of you that think that this atheism is a new thing and Christianity has run the world and Christianity is just, it needs to be blotted out because it's not been challenged before, and it's been this plight and this cancer on the world. Yeah, Voltaire, 300 years ago, said, in 100 years, Christianity will be a thing of history. It will be a thing of the past. It's funny how God works. Voltaire's house became the place for underground Bibles to be stored. And it actually at one time stored, its entire use was to store and distribute Bibles. I don't know if I can't remember if it was underground that they were doing this, but his house was used to store and distribute Bibles throughout Europe. God has a great sense of humor, and you're not going to squash him out. It's as C.S. Lewis said, it's like the insane person who's in the insane asylum. He scrawls the word darkness on the cell wall and expects the sun to be blotted out. God is eternal. He is omniscient. He is outside of time and he is inside of time. How do you think you're going to squash a being out whose your very fibers of existence depend on him existing? How do you think you're scrawling darkness on the side of your wall and going, "Ha, darkness, I got you"? It doesn't blot out the sun. It merely proves that you're in the right place. If you're in the asylum doing this, you're in the right place. Because it is insanity. It is insanity to do this. So you're trying to squash it out in America. You're trying to squash this out. So this brings me to another thought. And I hear this all the time. America was not founded on Judeo-Christian values. And it was not a Christian nation. And there was nothing, most of the founders were deists anyway. Actually, most of them were atheists, and they were deists. And then blah, 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 blah. I hear it all the time. I will grant you, it was not created and established as a Christian nation. Why? Because we wanted freedom of religion, not freedom from religion. Now, don't get hung up on that preposition. It seems like a really small thing to get hung up on, but that four-letter F word, from, is not constitutional. The two-letter word of is constitutional, and they have drastically different meanings. You're saying that you should be freed from the presence of religion when the Constitution says that everybody is free as a freedom of religion to practice as they see fit. So it's completely different definitions. My question is, if the roots of our Constitution and the roots of our philosophy were not grounded in Judeo-Christian values, and if the people weren't rooted in objective values and objective morality that comes from Judeo-Christian values. I know they pulled from the Enlightenment, but a lot of what they pulled from was John Locke, who was a Christian. Most of his writings were rooted in Judeo-Christian values. And so they pulled from the Enlightenment a little, but not a lot, because even Benjamin Franklin told Thomas Paine in his book Common Sense, he goes, "This book is like you slapping your mother for giving birth to you." Basically what he said. You get your sense of value. This is Benjamin Franklin. He told Thomas Paine in his book Common Sense, he said, you have obtained and understand your values and the values of life because of your Christian background. Not in spite of it, but because of it. And then you turn around and you say, "I didn't get it from that." It's like the pottery saying to the potter, "You didn't make me." He said, "It's like you're slapping your mother for giving birth to you." It's ridiculous. So, but here's my question though. Here's my question for my progressive friends, and I have them. I actually have lots of them. In the industry that I'm in, most of my friends are progressive. There are a few conservatives out there. And I don't talk in terms of Democrat and Republican, because both those platforms, both those parties, yeah, they need checkups from the neck ups. That's all I'm going to say. And I know I messed that up. It's checkup from the neck up, not necks. Anyway, so what happens? Why? So, no, let's change that. Why, if this is not a Christian, rooted in Christianity, this nation is not rooted in Judeo-Christian values, why has it taken the atheist 300 years to rip out all of the Christian and Judeo-Christian traditions from public life and even government? If we weren't rooted in those things, why do we have prayer before the sessions of Congress? Why does a president put his hand on the Bible? Why was there prayer in school? Oh, prayer in school didn't start till 1850. No, it was in school before. They took it out and they reinstituted it back in the 1950s. So there was always prayer in school up until a certain point, and it dropped away. And then they reinstituted it in 1950 and made it a point of emphasis. And Ronald Reagan made the Bible the book of the year in 1980 something, 88 or something like that was the year of the Bible. The Constitution itself, the Declaration of Independence, the words, it's self-evident. These inalienable rights are self-evident because of life, liberty, and the pursuit of, we call it happiness. John Locke actually said property. Why do they say that? Do you even know the story of why it says pursuit of happiness rather than the words property? Because John Locke, his whole thing was that individuals in individualism, they should have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of property, which he said would bring about happiness in those things. Why did they change it to pursuit of happiness? Because the founders, a lot of them, and actually 50 signers of the Declaration of Independence were abolitionists. And they knew in the South that slaves were considered property. And if they wrote that into a document in the foundation of our country, that the pursuit of property, then they would never be able to create a constitutional right or law or a constitutional amendment that would abolish slavery. Their goal was to have slavery abolished because they believed that every man was created equal. They believed that, and so that the abolitionists began right there at the Declaration of Independence to set the path of emancipation and abolition, just to nail it. They laid the groundwork, and that came out of the Judeo-Christian values, and those men were Christian. So, why? If we were not, I keep saying why, but if we were not a Judeo-Christian rooted in that, then why are you fighting so hard to eradicate what has traditionally been in public? You're railing against Christmas every year. Oh, there's Kwanzaa, there's Hanukkah. Yeah, there are those things, and they can be celebrated. But the national holiday set up by the founders was Christmas. And it's called Christmas time, and we have Christmas trees. You can't call it a holiday tree because it's not a tree for the holidays. It's a tree for Christmas. Yeah, well, they use it in all the Druids and all. Yes, they did. But as being an inclusive religion, Christianity said, oh, we like the tree. Yeah, we can bring the tree in. Because we're not evil, maniacal people. Yeah, we can bring the tree in. And so they brought the tree in, and it became a part of the Christmas tradition to have a Christmas tree. It became something that we loved. And Santa Claus came in. Yeah, we bring all these things in because we're actually inclusive. You wouldn't see Muslims bringing in some secular thing in and going, yeah, we can make this a part of this. Yeah, fine. Santa Claus, that's fine, because we know the real reason of the season is still fun. It's fun to talk about Santa Claus. It's kind of a cool thing to do. Now, for the record, our kids know Santa Claus is not real, but he's like Mickey Mouse or he's like Spider-Man. He's fun. He is fun to pretend about. He's fun to watch movies and sing songs about. But Mom and Daddy get the presents. Mom and Daddy and Grandpa and Best Mom and Bestify, we get the presents. So if this nation was not rooted and founded in Judeo-Christian values, it should have been very simple for the atheist to have taken control and to have eradicated Christian traditions from without much breaking a sweat at all, because there really shouldn't have been any. If there was a true separation of church and state as we understand it as being propagated today, then there should have been no Bibles given to the military. There should have been no oaths given. There should have been no prayers given at any time, at any place. There should have been none of this, unless what you're calling separation of church and state is not actually what the framers had intended. And John Adams said that America is a moral and religious, is a nation of moral religious people. If we lose morality and religion, then the Constitution cannot be a document that will sustain them. And it's true, because every time that what happens in the Constitution? Let's talk about what happens in the Constitution. The Constitution requires several things: objective morality, understanding of objective reality, and self-governance, which is what the Judeo-Christian values are all about. It is about my relationship with Christ and Christ inside of me that creates in me a new creature and creates in me a new heart and a new mind. I become a new person, and I allow the Holy Spirit to govern me. And that helps me stay centered and governed, because I know there's an objective reality, there's an objective morality, and the Holy Spirit is leading and guiding me into all truth. And that creates a good self-check for me to keep myself in check, so that my fellow man doesn't have to. I know it's wrong to lie, because the Holy Spirit convicts me when I lie, and I go apologize and say, oh man, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have lied. I should not have lied. That was my bad, my fault. But when you begin to breed moral relativism in, guess what happens to the limited government? Guess what happens to the Bill of Rights? Guess what happens to the commandments? The same thing that happened when when God gave Moses the 10 Commandments. It wound up being 633 commandments. Why? Because man always overregulates, because he wants to put other men in their place, and he wants to guard, and he wants to protect, and he wants to do all these things. See, when you start to untether the Constitution from Judeo-Christian values, it loses its power, it loses its authority, because what do you have to create? You have to control people. How do you control moral relativists? If everybody believes they have the ability to create their own subjective morals and their own subjective codes, how do you create a social convention to control them all? Well, you have to create a lot of regulations, and you have to create a lot of laws, wherein if we went back to my word is my bond, and if I said something and I broke my word, then you could actually take legal action against me because I shook your hand. Well, you didn't. And what would we do? I didn't shake his hand. I didn't mean it. We would come up with a million ways why, because we're bent. But if we were following after an objective reality, an objective moral code, and we were allowing the Holy Spirit to lead and guide us, we could have a much more successful society. Less regulations, and we would have a much more successful society. But we don't, because we depend on the government to regulate us. Because we each have individual, personal philosophies and moral subjective relativity. And inside of that, each of us has to look to a higher authority to get our regulations and to get our moral structures, to live in our social contract. The framers looked to the Judeo-Christian values, and they looked to God and the Holy Spirit to be that higher power. These inalienable rights were granted to us by our Creator. These are natural laws. Our Creator is the authority that we look to above government. And why do they give the Bill of Rights? Why did they carve out these laws? Why do they carve out the Bill of Rights and say, this is where government shall make no law infringing? What kind of government creates parameters upon itself? A government that understands objective reality. Now, the framers looked to God as the transcendent and as the authority. Look to God as the authority. A moral relativist has to look at the social contract. Who creates the social contract? Government. So government has to be the authority. And if government's the authority, they have to create more laws to keep everybody into a certain parameter. Well, that's not what the framers had in mind. Again, John Adams said, the Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. If the people lose their morality and if they lose their religion, the Constitution is not a document that can govern them. That's a paraphrase. But why? And so this brings us. I had a thought where I was going with that. So this brings us to another point about the Constitution. And this is why the revolution continues. This is why This is why President Obama does not care about the Constitution. He does classic overreach. He does executive overreach. This is why that the liberal and progressive judges on the Supreme Court go to judicial activism, and they say, well, I think the law should be this because this is the essence of what it should be. I'm not going to say whether it's constitutional or not as it's written. I'm going to say what I think should be, what ought to be. And so you have executive overreach and you have judicial overreach. Why? Because they don't care about the Constitution. The progressive agenda is the fact that the elitist, white, privileged, white, Eurocentric, Judeo-Christian founding fathers, which that's sexist to say founding fathers, just say founders, don't say fathers, because that gives a paternalistic framework to it, and how women were poorly treated and blacks were poorly treated and all this, and so it was inherently racist and it was inherently sexist and it was misogynistic. And they go down the line and they say that the country, because of the way they treated the Native Americans, the Indians, because of the way they did that everything about America, everything about the Constitution, everything about it is illegitimate. And the Constitution is old, irrelevant, and flat out wrong. And they would love nothing more than to destroy it and replace it with something better. But let me say this. I'm going to say a lot more, but let me say this. There is nothing better. If there were, it would be there. As Mark Zuckerberg supposedly said in the meeting with the Vossel-Winkle whatever twins in the movie Social Network, I created Facebook. They didn't create it, because if they would have created it, we wouldn't be here right now. But I'm the one who created it. They did not create the social network. And since they didn't create it, and I created it, we shouldn't even be here right now. But this is what happens. The progressives, they want to destroy the Constitution because they think it was ill-conceived. In fact, President Obama, when he was actually teaching constitutional law at a small college in Chicago, he actually said that the Constitution is a set of negative liberties, and it should be a positive set of liberties, because a negative set of liberties only mentions and says what you cannot do. It never says what you must do. That's because the framers wanted the people to do things. They wanted the people to do things. Government wasn't supposed to do anything. Government wasn't supposed to be a part of this. Government was to take care of disputes, of keeping us safe, and foreign disputes and things like that. They weren't supposed to create the infrastructure. They weren't supposed to be a part of this. They weren't supposed to oversee this. It was supposed to be individualism. We, as a nation of people, a nation of immigrants, we the people, and the government was going to be of us, and we were all going to do this together. It wasn't supposed to be relying on monarchical thought of the government, do this for me. But the progressives think differently. And that's how I know that the Constitution could not have been created out of any other worldview than Judeo-Christian values. Well, how do I know this? One, because it wasn't created. Western culture wasn't created until Judeo-Christian values and worldviews came to light after the birth of Christ and the death of Christ. That's how I know, one. And two, because every worldview that has been infused into the Constitution, other than Judeo-Christian values, has lessened the authority of the Bill of Rights, has challenged it, and has tried to pull it down. Atheism, scientism, feminism, progressivism have all tried to undo the small government and the Bill of Rights and the rights of the people. They have tried to undermine that. If that is not the case, then the progressives would not be passing thousands of regulations in the executive branch with the EPA, the Homeland Security, the FBI, the CIA, the USDA, the EPA, the FCC. They all produce regulations that have just as much authority as a congressional law, yet they are produced by people who were not elected of the people and for the people. That is not how the framers would have had it. That's how I know that the Constitution, as it originally was and as originally intended to be, could not have come out of any other worldview than Judeo-Christian worldview, because if it had, then it would still be continued, even though these other worldviews have now been infused into the philosophy of those leading the country and those who are actually supposed to be protecting the Constitution. They are undermining the Constitution because they think it's illegitimate, irrelevant, and wrong. So, that's why you have the President Obama, saying, you didn't build that? It wasn't yours? You didn't build the metro system? You didn't build the police force? You didn't do this? And you couldn't have created jobs. Elizabeth Warren said the same thing. So Elizabeth Warren and the President have both come out in the last few years and started with this "you didn't build it" type thing. Well, you were able to create this business because the other taxpayers paid for police, so you didn't get marauded on the way to work, and that the other taxpayers paid for roads, so you could drive to work, and your customers could drive to work, and you could have trucks and trains and stuff to go on, and because the law was set up, and because the government exists, you can actually have a business. No. This is a classic example of chicken egg. Which came first? Let's say it this way. Let's put it this way. The government does not create jobs. The government does not create revenue. The government does not create commerce. The government collects and regulates. That's what they do. They collect taxes and they regulate the economy. They do not create anything. And where does the government get its money to do these things? They get their money from us. And so there was the European guy who came over in the 1700s, and he wanted to see what made America so great and so vibrant. And he says that in Europe, the way to gain more wealth as a nation was you would go take over another nation and take their wealth and then take their stuff. That's how you got wealthy. That's how you sustained wealth. And if your country was getting low on wealth, you would go to war and knock somebody off or get defeated and they would take your stuff. But in America, people got rich by taking an idea and monetizing it. An individual would say, hey, I like making horseshoes, and he would make horseshoes and go around and sell those and create, he would create income from an idea. Revolutionary, no pun intended for the revolution, but that was amazing to this guy that we could do that. So the government has nothing to do with a person monetizing an idea. They don't do that. They didn't create that idea. They didn't create that person. They didn't create the materials to do that. All they do is collect taxes and regulate. Now, in doing that and in creating taxes and regulate, they do create better roads. But what would have happened? What would have happened in a country without a government? Let's see. Did the Native Americans, the people that were here, wasn't really America, but did the Iroquois and the Cherokee, did they have trade routes? Did the explorers who came over, did they trade with the people native to this land? I think they did. But how could they? Because the government didn't create roads. They didn't create police forces to keep people safe. How did they do that? You know how they did it? They took a risk. The one thing that the President Obama and Elizabeth Warren will not tell you, the thing they will not tell you is that the risk involved is mine. The risk involved is yours, and you did take that risk, and you did put your life on the line. You did put your finance on. You put your family on the line. You did that. They won't say that. Why? Because they can't take credit for it. But they're taking credit for your business. So you better give us the money because we made it possible for you to have that money. So actually that money is ours. We need a chunk of that because it's ours. No. You didn't come up with the idea and you didn't take the risk, Buster. You'll get what I give you. And I'll send elected officials there who are like me, and we'll take this thing to court. We'll create laws that say the president cannot say stuff like this, being silly now. But the point that I'm making is we have a government of the people and for the people. And yes, I came up with an idea. I monetized that. I took a risk. People took a risk on me. All that risk taking had nothing to do with government, had nothing to do with the taxes and that road out there, had nothing to do with police forces and CIA and all that kind of stuff. Well, guess what? If the country was in pandemonium, people would still be trading. People would still be buying. Commerce would still go on. It would be different, but it would still go on. Why? Because people need things and people need money. And so the government makes it easier for us, but the government did not do that for us to say, oh, we're going to make this great thing so you can just have all the things you want. No, the government doesn't do that. The government doesn't create anything. They regulate and collect. That's what they do. The executive branch, they execute the law. They enforce the law. Judicial branch, they judge whether the laws created by Congress, whose their job is to make the laws, whether those laws are constitutional, should be based on an original understanding of the text. A constitutionalist, an originalist to the Constitution. Was this what the framers meant? We don't have that anymore. We have things that have stepped way over the bounds of the Constitution. This is how I know that the Judeo-Christian model, the roots of that, are so deep in our country. And the more that we allow progressives and atheists to rip these roots out, the less and less the Constitution will have authority. And at some point, they will have to go and create a new government. My question is, what's better? Milton Friedman, in an interview with Phil Donahue says, aren't you the least bit worried about the greed of capitalism and how the fat get fatter and the rich get richer and the poor man's left behind and the middle class they're waiting for the trickling down of the economy and they're grasping at these things and how the greed is just so inherent and how it's just bad because it has all these evil immoral things about it. Milton Friedman's response was amazing, and I'm paraphrasing all this. You can watch the videos on YouTube, Milton Friedman, Phil Donahue interview on the evils of socialism. And it was amazing what he said, because what you hear today with Bernie Sanders people is we want a moral economy. We want an economy that's moral. I want to ask you, and I will say it just like Milton Friedman said it, is socialism any more moral? Are socialism any more virtue? Does socialism reward virtue? No. It rewards a good idea with good with good commerce and good marketing. It rewards those things. It does not reward virtue. Does a president, and Milton Friedman said, furthermore, does a president reward virtue? Does he appoint candidates to his cabinet? Does he appoint appointees to his cabinet based on the virtue of the person or based on their political clout? Do you send a person over to be the ambassador of Russia based on their virtue or based on their political clout in that area? What makes a government moral? Is socialism more moral than capitalism? Maybe. If its people are more moral. But what happens when you give people more control? They take more control. What happens if you give people less control? They still try to take more control. Because it's what it's about. It's about control. And even if Bernie Sanders were an amazing president, the next person who comes in may not be. And they may create laws that don't allow you to vote a certain way. My wife had an interesting conversation with people from Australia. And the Australian said, oh, in my country, you have to vote. You don't get there's not an option to not vote. It's the law to vote. You get fined if you don't vote. But guess what? They don't get to choose the candidates. They were saying that, well, it should be mandatory to vote in America. But the way they do it is you don't get to choose a candidate. Well, that's kind of weird. Why would you not get to choose your own candidate? So it's not a person of the people. The party picks the candidate, and then you go and vote for either the party or you go vote for a candidate. You say, well, it's the same thing here. They basically, look at the Democratic Party. They want Hillary, and so they're forcing Hillary. Yeah, they are. But guess what? People have a voice. And we can stand up to the system. You see, when the system falls apart, and this is what is so amazing about the Constitution. It actually requires us, if this republic, and as Benjamin Franklin came out of Philadephia, he came out of the convention there, and they said, "What kind of government do we have?" His response was, "A republic, if we can keep it." The Constitution is so written that if the republic fails and it becomes so oppressive and it becomes so progressive that it crushes the soul of America, we who hold to the Constitution, we, the people, are mandated to rise up, overthrow the government, and start over. That's what we're required to do. That is absolutely amazing, that the Constitution was written in such that they knew the hearts of men. See, socialism is written with an understanding that if you just have the right policies, if you just have the right person in there, if you just have the right person in government, government will be amazing. You know what that's called? That's called monarchical thinking. Not malarkey, but monarchical, as in a monarch. If you just have the right king, man, it's amazing. Yeah, and kings, if you have the right king, it could be amazing to have a king. He would be just so good to have a great king. But when you have a king, you have the ability to have bad kings, really bad tyrant kings who will never leave. And they have children who will never leave. That's what makes this system so great, is you have 2 terms. You're out. Somebody else has to come in. That's what makes America so amazing. As socialism has its benefits, yes, it does, but there are so many downsides to socialism, and it's not more moral. It's only more moral if there are people who have those morals that are in there. The Constitutional Republic of the United States, even if somebody is immoral, they are limited in their powers at how much damage they can do. Why did the framers do this? Because the framers knew that we're bent. They knew the heart of men. They knew that men would go astray, that men would be ambitious, and they would be self-serving, and that they would thirst and lust and hunger after the power of the presidency. And that's why they put the purse strings in the House. And that's why they created the Senate. They created congressional separation of power, and they've created the judicial branch. So the president overreaches, Supreme Court says, nope, sorry, buddy. There are 4 people in the government who have a power struggle. You have the president, who is the head of the executive branch. Did you realize that? He's only the head of the executive branch. He's the head of state when he goes to foreign nations, but inside this country, he's not the big cheese. He's the head of the executive branch. You have the Chief Justice, who's the head of the Supreme Court. They have equal authority in their branches of government. And then you have the Speaker of the House. The Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader, they share equal power in those branches of government. I do believe the Speaker of the House does carry a little more clout. He is sort of equal to the President, because in the original founding, there was only the House of Representatives, which represented the people, and they made the law. So the Senate came later. I'm not sure how much later, but the Senate did come later. So you had those 3. And so now the Senate Majority Leader and the House Speaker of the House are sort of co-equal, but they're all co-equal in their authority and power by the separation of powers of the way the Constitution is, in the triangular shape of our government, where you have the executive, judicial, and legislative branches. They have checks and balances because they knew that these people would be bent. They knew you would have a Barack Obama who would come in and undermine the Constitution. So this goes out. This goes out to Harry Reid. This goes out to everybody right now. This goes out to everybody right now who is on the bandwagon for this narrative going out. There's a narrative going out right now that Donald Trump rose to prominence because of the vitriol and hatred that the GOP, that's the grand old party, or the Republicans, the GOP had for Obama and that they expressed in the media every day, the vitriol and bigotry and hatred. They actually said the bigotry. Barack Obama says, because of the bigotry that they had against me is the reason why Donald Trump rose to power. It spread like a disease through the Republican constituents. I want to say right now, that is false. It is true that Mitch McConnell said, I will fight this man every day in Congress. I will vote down everything he pushes through. Now, why did Mitch McConnell say that? I really don't know why he said that, truly. But I want to bring something to bear here. And what I want to bring to bear is this. We knew that he was a progressive. We knew the people that influenced him. We knew the type of ideology that he was bringing up. We had his lectures. We listened to his lectures where he said the Constitution is wrong and it needs to be a positive set of liberties. So we knew that he said he was going to come in and fundamentally change America. We knew that he was going to push through progressive ideas that were not constitutional ideas because he didn't care about the Constitution. He can say he did, but everything he has done proves, the proof is in the pudding, or as they say, judge a man by his fruits. You look at the fruits of the president and you can say without a shadow of a doubt that he has had disrespect for the Constitution, that it has not been in his best interest to uphold the Constitution. He has said many times, I'm not a king, I'm not a king, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do immigration on my own, I can't do this on my own. Well, you know what, I'm going to do it on my own. He has pushed through more executive orders, and people say, oh no, George Bush did way more, Ronald Reagan did way more executive orders. He has pushed through more executive orders that had no law preceding them than any president in the history of this. He has gone over this. And so it was not the vitriol that created Donald Trump. And Harry Reid saying the same thing. Harry Reid went through on the speech, one of my liberal Bernie Sanders friends, Bernie Sanders supporters, sent me this video where from the Senate floor, Harry Reid stood up and he gave this speech. This speech was so riddled with logical fallacies and agenda-driven propaganda that I was so frustrated listening to it, because it was based on the premise that Donald Trump rose to power and that Donald Trump is the fruition. He's the fruition. He is the face. He is actually the what do they call it when the personification. He is the personification of the Republican mindset. If you took the Republican mindset, you took their platform, you took their ideologies, and you put it into a science experiment, it will come out as Donald Trump, because that's what they believe. That's who they are. No. Wrong. It is not that at all. And what it does, it distracts from the truth of how the rise of Donald Trump came to be. I talked about this early on in the Revolutionary Part 1. Never really got to Revolutionary Part 2, so you could kind of say this is Revolutionary Part 2. Donald Trump rose to power for three reasons. Number one, the constant abuse of the executive branch of government. Barack Obama's his constant overreach, his constant snide comments to those who cling to their God and guns. He has put down over half of the country, and he does it all the time. He sticks up for special interests, and he is driving through agendas that have nothing to do with the well-being of a percentage of the population, but he goes for a smaller percent of the population and pushes through. Let's talk about Obamacare, because Harry talks about this. Well, there were 50 million people without insurance. There were 31 million people without insurance. He said, and we have 50 million people without insurance, and we now have 20 million people on insurance. Yeah, that's great. So he said, we have less than 10% who don't have insurance. Let's do the math. 10% of 330 million is 33 million people. We had 31 million people without insurance before Obamacare. So we put 20 million on, and we still have 33 million people without insurance. Interesting. But he did a trick there. He said he talked about millions of people in one portion, in which that sounds massive. We put 20 million people on insurance. That's less than 7% of the population. But when he said millions of people, we think that's a massive number. But when he talked about people who are not on health care, who do not have health, and do not have health insurance, that's another trick they use too. They talked about it as health care. It's not health care, it's health insurance. So the 33 million who didn't have health insurance before, he called it 50 million and said 20 million have it and less than 10% don't have it now, which is the same number of people who didn't have it before. But when you say less than 10% of the population, you think, whoa, only less than 10% of the population don't have health insurance. That's 30 plus million people. That's the same number as it was before the law was passed. And you have health insurance providers who are in the red and they can't pay for this and the premiums are up. What they didn't tell you also was when they said premiums are going to be $50 a month or $200 a month, they're going to be so much less. Yeah, that's amazing. Because you might get your premium down to $300 a month. Your out of pocket is exorbitant. I looked at some for myself in the exchange, and we're talking about $6,000 to $10,000 personal out of pocket. That's my deductible. That's what I have to pay before the insurance kicks in, and then it was $15,000 to $30,000 after that. That was my out of pocket. That was for me. One of these insurance policies was $20,000 deductible for my family, and $60,000 out of pocket for the first year. And it was going to cost me like $500. Oh, actually, it was going to cost me $1,500 a month for that plan. And that's not affordable, folks. So what we have is we have a president who continues the overreach. So that overreach right there, immigration overreach, LGBT overreach, anything you want to do. Every time there was a specific crime, which was cops versus a black person. Anytime that was there, the president would immediately step up to the mic and say, they acted stupidly, they were wrong, this is racist. He would say that every time. Now, I don't care whether it is or not. I want you to step back from your emotional cliff right now and your emotional tirade you're about to go on. I don't care whether that is right or that is wrong. Here's the fact. He stepped up to the mic immediately when it happened, and he had no information other than what was given to him by his people. Now, if his people are so smart, why didn't he know all the terror attacks that took place, all the things in Libya and Benghazi and these other things? When other things would happen, he would step up to the mic and go, "Oh yeah, I saw the news. I saw it like everybody else. I just found out. I just saw it on CNN. CNN just played it. I just saw it. Wow. Whew. Yeah, I don't know. I'm like everybody else. I'm like everybody else in America. I just saw it. Oh, listen, I just saw it. It was just on CNN. I was in the car with Michelle, and I just saw it. And yeah, I'm shocked. I'm shocked like you guys are. I'm upset. I'm outraged, and we're gonna do something about this." But the second after they caught wind of any kind of cop shooting someone, it was they were wrong. This is racist, and that could have been my son. Before he had any facts. What I'm saying there is there's an intellectual dishonesty that people got so tired of. They got so tired of getting browbeat over the head by their president saying, guns are wrong. You need to stop holding to your God and guns. These people down in West Virginia, that's what they want. And just vilifying people. But this is a Solinsky tactic. A Solinsky tactic is you take every issue and you polarize it. You take away the middle ground. You exclude the middle, and you say you're either with us or you're against us. And if you're against us, you're wrong. And so in doing that, he has divided this country. It's not by accident the country's divided. He did it purposely. And what I'm saying purposely is the intent of what he was doing was there. Whether he did it not knowingly, I don't know if he did it knowingly. But what I know is it was intentional in how it was presented, whether he or his cabinet or those around him pulling the strings, if you will, I don't know. But by doing those things, it was very intentional what he was doing to us. It may not have been intentional on his end, but it was intentional in how it separated us out. The second thing that that gave rise to Donald Trump is how spineless the GOP was, the ones that we elected from we the people to fight against him. So the majority of the people back in 2008, the majority of the people were considered to be, I think 40-some% were self-proclaimed conservatives. Now it's 36 and 36 between conservatives and liberals. And then there's 36% or 33% in there of 37% of independents. So everybody's around 33% now. So it's pretty even all throughout. But at this time, there were more conservatives who were actually a representative of the nation. We sent these people in to take care of him, to hold him at bay. And they tried for a few times, and then they found out they couldn't press through because of the pressures of social convention and social media, and how they would be vilified and how they would be held responsible. What's funny is they got so mad at Ted Cruz because Ted Cruz gave a 21-hour speech. If you have not listened to his 21-hour speech, it was amazing. It was when I really started paying attention to Ted Cruz. I paid attention before when I would see him on the news and stuff, and it was like, there's something about his language. I mean, there's something about what he says and he presents himself. It's really good. And I listened to that 21-hour speech and I said, there's a guy that I can get behind, because there's a guy who's fighting for what I believe in. He's fighting for this, and he's fighting, and his arguments are they're so rock solid. They're so logical and sound. And I was so glad that he was fighting for me and fighting for what he said he would fight for. And he made a campaign promise and kept it. And basically the government got shut down because the president said, if you don't get this onto the continuing resolution, I won't sign it. I'll veto it, and it will shut down the government. And Ted, it'll be your fault. And the Republicans freaked out. The GOP freaked out and said, Ted, we're going to lose the House. We're going to lose our influence. We're going to lose our power. We're going to lose our authority. The fat cats, the lobbyists won't give me any more money because they won't need me anymore, and I'll lose everything that I have. You have to get on board, Ted. You have to get on board. There's only one party here. It's the Washington Party. And Ted said, no, I'm sorry. I made a promise. I have to keep that promise. You can say, oh, he's grandstanding. Yeah, fine. I don't care if he was grandstanding. He did a damn good job. And so what you have is the GOP being spineless forever and always, and basically allowing him to do everything. The president got anything he wanted. Harry Reid got anything he wanted. They even allowed the Senate to change the rules of voting because there were only 47. There were only 47 senators. There were only 47 senators, and they needed 60 votes to pass this. And they said, we'll give them 50 votes to pass this, and we can all vote no on this. And we look like we're really fighting for the American people. This came out. This was in Ted Cruz's book. This is why Ted Cruz didn't like Mitch McConnell, because Mitch McConnell would do show votes and say, we voted no for this. We voted no. Power to the GOP. Hey, people, we got your back. And he didn't. And he was just worried about the lobbyists, and he was just worried about his own special interest. And so what you have is you have people, we won in 2010, the Tea Party came up and we gave them the House Representatives. 2012, we gave them the Senate. They said, we need the Senate. Republicans said, if we have the Senate, man, we can really put the heat and put the fire to Obama's feet. They got the Senate. And I can't tell whether Mitch McConnell's running it or Harry Reid's running it, because it seems like it's exactly the same. That disenfranchised the voters. And so the voters did not want to vote for any politician coming outside of Washington. Now, Ted Cruz has been the exception because the establishment and Mitch McConnell and the GOP hated Ted Cruz because of the shutdown. Now, real quickly on the shutdown. Number one, they only shut down 17% of the government. The government still ran. You know, there's 3.5 million employees inside the federal government. 3.5 million employees in the federal government. They could stand to be pared down a little bit anyway. So anyway, there was only 17% of the government got shut down. Everything else ran. Food stamps, all that stuff ran. None of that stuff was shut down. Just some parks were shut down. And the fact that they were signing a continuing resolution was something that was put into effect when Harry took over the Senate. You see, The way they used to do spending in the House bills was they were called appropriations bills. And you did one for defense, and you did one for food stamps, and you did one for VA, and you did one for Obamacare. You did one, it wasn't a law then, but you would do, each issue would have its own appropriations bill to get paid, and you would pass them individually, and the president would sign them individually. Well, Harry Reid lumped them all together and called it a continuing resolution. Let's just continue what we've been doing. We'll put them all together and we'll send it to the president. He'll sign it and we'll be on our way. But guess what happens when you put them all together? Is you can't use the power of the person anymore to pull out stuff because the president says, I won't sign it. And then you have the media who loves the president flip it on you and say, you guys didn't sign this. Ted Cruz, you shut down the government. Why did Ted Cruz hates the government. He hates the people. He shut down the government. He's going, and food stamps, and people are going to starve, and they're going to do this. And none of that got shut down. So the GOP is to blame. I will agree with Harry Reid and the president that the GOP is to blame partly for the rise of Trump, but it's not for the reason that they're saying it. The third reason is political correctness has just been out of control. And so this is political correctness overcorrecting itself. Because you couldn't say this. If a candidate said anything that was controversial, the super PACs and the donors would pull their money, and that candidate wouldn't have any money to run, and they would invariably have to leave the race. Well, Donald Trump said, I'm going to fund myself. So he had no super PACs. So he could say whatever he wanted, whatever came to his mind to say, and whether it was broken sentences, if I can speak now, since I'm making fun of him. These broken sentences and this just gobbledygook of words that would come out of his mouth, and it didn't matter what he said, how offensive it was, because he was funding himself and they had no power. And suddenly what was broken in America was this political correctness glass ceiling that was on there, and he shattered through it. That is one thing I'm thankful for that he has brought to back into politics and back into public life is I can say what I mean. I can say what I think. The problem is when people start saying what they think, sometimes it's really bad. But the First Amendment gives us a right to say those things. And the government should make no law prohibiting the freedom of speech or press. So what had happened was the press and social media was putting the kibosh and creating a glass ceiling. There was no law from government, but because the newspapers were funding these government officials, and they were giving donations to people. And so, I mean, look at the guy at Amazon who runs the Washington Post or something like that. He gives billions of dollars to people. A side note, Planned Parenthood is, for all intents and purposes, for what I see it as a money laundering system for the Democratic Party, because they give millions of dollars to Democratic candidates. They don't give any money to conservative candidates. So we pay as taxpayers, we pay Planned Parenthood $500 million, and then Planned Parenthood uses some of their money, whether it's from that $500 million or not, they use money over there to then fund. They use it to fund Democratic candidates, Hillary Clinton being one of them. So she would obviously have nice things to say because they actually give her money. The impropriety of that would send any other private corporation and the leaders of that, it would send them to federal prison. It's just a quid pro quo. That would just the appearance and the speculation of the things that are going on there would send them. That'd be felony charges. They would go to prison for that, for money laundering, especially on taxpayer dollars. Anyway, I digress. And that's all I'm going to say about that. I won't get in the whole Planned Parenthood thing right now. So the political correctness has gone awry, where you can't say this, you can't say that. You have to agree with me. And so these agendas have been pushed through, and the media and social media have helped put the pressure on people and say, you can't say that. You can't say that. If you say that on social media, you get burned out. You'll lose your business. They'll take these things away from the media, will excoriate you, and they will eviscerate you. And so people were afraid to say anything because a single person couldn't stand up to that. You couldn't stand up to the barrage of press and social media shaming that you would get for stepping out of line or saying something silly. But Donald Trump fixed all that, at least for himself, and at least for speaking the mind of the people. Now, the fact he's speaking what people are thinking is a little scary because some of the stuff coming out of his mouth is woof. But those are the three reasons why Donald Trump rose to his to be the GOP nominee. Executive overreach, spineless GOPs elected and not fighting for the people that elected them, and 3, political correctness, overcorrecting. And people were finally like, someone is at least, I don't care if what he's saying is correct or not, what he's saying, he is just saying what he thinks, and he's getting away with it, and it's not hurting him. He actually said that he could shoot a guy on Fifth Avenue and nobody would do anything about it, and he's actually pretty correct. So let's bring us to one of the last things here is the social media spotlight. Let's wrap it up with this. The social media spotlight. Social media has been it's been a good thing. It's been a bane on our society, but it's also enlightened society a bit. A lot of people are shying away from social media now, understanding that the temptations there of social media and the attention that it's the attractiveness of social media wears pretty thin really quick. It has done a couple things. The good thing it's done is we know what we're up against. We know what we're dealing with. We know what people are thinking at any time of the day. And actually, we know where people are most times of the day, which is freaking scary. I actually quit Foursquare. Because people would check in all the time. Sometimes people would check in when they went to their bedrooms. And I knew that they were in their bedrooms at this time. And I was like, okay, this is creepy. You just told me where you were in your own house. I'm out. People know way too much. And so people are like, well, put me on this so I can know where you, there's like this app where you can, your friends and family can know where your cell phone is at all times. They can know where you are. I was like, no. Big Brother has enough on me already. I would thank you. The NSA can know where I am, but I don't want anybody else being able to hack into this and know where I am. Although the NSA probably gets hacked and other people probably know where I am. I digress. The bad is that it gives voice to extreme arguments and allows people to become emboldened in those extreme arguments, whether they're right or wrong. But in that same bad, it's good. So this is kind of like Pandora's box, if you will. Do you remember when Pandora opened the box and all these evil things came out, and she shut the box down and there was a little knock, and she says, "Who's that?" And it says, "I'm Hope." She's like, "I've just let all these evil things out into the world." And Hope says, "Yeah, that's why I'm here, because I can give people hope. Even though all the bad things are out there, we still have hope." Or if you look at the modal logic of Christian philosopher Alvin Plantinga. Alvin Plantinga says in modal logic, he says that it's the moral argument against God, where if there's free will and God could have created a world where we could have free will and everyone could have good in their hearts, and people reject this and say, well, if you have true free will, God can't make you be good. He has to give you the options to choose goodness. That's true free will. And some people say, well, there's so much evil in the world, how could God let that exist? And the modal logic answer to this is the good of the cross and what the cross did is so good and so powerful that it trumps any world where man would be good with free will and not having a choice to do bad. The good of the cross is so good that it overcomes any evil created by man, by the rejection of God. I don't know whether you agree with that modal logic, but that has just really made me think in times about the power of the cross and why it's so important in our lives. That the power of the cross can overcome any evil, any atrocity. It can overcome the Holocaust. Why? Because if you read Corrie ten Boom, The Hiding Place, how she survived a Holocaust death camp in Auschwitz. She survived it by relying on God, that God helped her overcome those things. You say, well, 6 million people died, so he didn't help them overcome. The power of the cross and what he did at the cross, and he allowed relationship with him, and he allowed forgiveness and regeneration over trumps any evil. And so you also have to know that just because someone dies doesn't mean death doesn't mean the same thing to a Christian. You torture and kill a Christian, and you say that was an evil atrocity. Why would God let that happen? Well, one, it's a witness to God that this person held fast and held true. They believed in him so much they were willing to give their lives. That's a testimony for him. And two, the reward for doing that is heaven. So there's not a bad. Well, what about the women and the children who don't know him? God's a very just God, way more just than we are. And I will tell you how I know that, because the intolerant, the tolerance people have become so intolerant, which is what I call the President Coin theorem, that when those who have been oppressed, those who have allegedly been oppressed, and those who think they've been oppressed get any type of authority and suddenly have authority over those who oppressed them, allegedly oppressed them, or they thought oppressed them. I'm making those specific aspects there and carving those three areas out. They will obliterate and become way more oppressive than what their oppressors were. If you've not seen The Mockingjay, turn this off right now or just skip over this part. But in The Mockingjay, President Snow says to Katniss, have you been looking at President Coin? Watch out for her. No one's been watching her. You and I have been watching each other. Who's been watching her? So when President Snow is captured and Katniss is in the meeting with all the leaders and President Coin says, I will be the interim president for a while, but we have to decide what we're going to do with the prisoners of war, the captives that we've captured from the Capitol. And her solution was, we need to reinstitute the Hunger Games and show them what they put us through and put them through what we went through. The whole reason for the revolution was because of the Hunger Games, and because they, for 75 years, had been having systematic games where they forced each district to send 2 people from each district to go kill each other to show to pay their penance for peace, to pay their penance to the Capitol for the atrocities that they did during the war. President Coin rose to power. They built District 13, rose from the ashes, overcame their oppressors, and then stood there as they overcame their oppressors and said, to my oppressors, I now will put you through exactly what I just came through. See, this is what I don't understand about moral relativists. They get to choose. Militant atheist, you get to choose to any personality you want. You get to choose any belief you want, any philosophy you want. Why would you choose to be a jackass? And why would you choose to be this militant person who just spews vitriol and hatred for someone who disagrees with you? You have the chance to choose to believe anything you want to believe, and you choose to be nasty, and you choose to be militant. You choose to as Richard Dawkins says, ridicule them and mock them into disbelief. You can choose anything you want to be, and you choose, I've already said jackass, but you choose to be just this big jerk. And I don't understand why you would choose to do that. Shouldn't you be better? You said atheism is better. You said, I get to choose my own morals. I don't need God to show me how to be moral. I can be moral all on my own. I can be better than you Christians, and I'll show you how to be better. And then you turn around and you're so much worse than what Christians, than the Christians you even know. And you're so much more judgmental, and you're so vile in what you say to people, and you ridicule and you mock and you put down and you try to tramp out and destroy every living, breathing Christian you know, to stamp it out. It's amazing. You have the opportunity to be better, and you choose to be worse. And I don't understand. I mean, I do understand it because I was in atheism for a while, and I understand the euphoria you get. The euphoria that you get with with this knowledge that you are superior to them, that you have come to the intellect. Atheism is like nirvana. Yeah, I've reached the apex. And then suddenly you've realized that you're at the top of the food chain. You are the top of the intellectual food chain. And then you die. So what the freak does it matter? It doesn't. And if you follow any version of atheism to its full conclusion, it has to and will always lead to nihilism. So as I'm concluding here tonight, there's a lot going on in the world. There's things to be upset by. There are things to be really worn down by. And one of the reasons why I haven't done a podcast in a while, too, is the fact that there's so much going on. I didn't have time to digest it all. See, that's a problem with social media. You get so much information thrown at you. It's called information overload. That's what I call it, information overload or information saturation. And you get so much that you literally stop intaking information. You know, when I was in college, and I hadn't been in college for a few years. I went to college. I dropped out. I went to college. And again, I went back to college. And I remember being in South Carolina with my now wife. And I actually got to a point in this college, because I was at a community college, and then I actually went to a major university down in South Carolina. And I remember studying, and I got to a point where I literally could not intake any more information into my brain. And that's what happens to me with social media and stuff. I'll go onto Facebook, and I'll listen to, I'll tell you who I listen to. I listen to Glenn Beck. I listen to Glenn Beck's podcast. Oh my goodness, I must be a mental case. Listen to a little bit of Rush Limbaugh, but he's got a little weak sauce on me there. He has a great, brilliant, analytical mind. Anyway, I digress. Let's go back to that. But I literally, at one point, could not learn. I had to put down my books and take a couple of days off and just let my brain detox and defrag and just go and go back to it. So what I found with social media is I had to do that. I have to do that as well. I have to put it down. Because, see, these arguments, again, what I started the show with, these arguments that come out that people say, and they think that just because they slam the argument down, or they make a quick judgment on it, bam, I got a judgment out on it. I give my opinion. It's over. It's done. That's it. Well, no. These arguments have been going on for years. Some of these arguments have been going on for millennia. For eons, these arguments have been going on, and we haven't come to the conclusion. So the fact that you give a two-sentence answer and you think you put someone in your place, you haven't. Just because you answer quickly and just because someone doesn't respond with the correct response doesn't mean you're correct. It just means you haven't been challenged correctly enough in this. So even myself, even all these judgments I've made, all these opinions, all these commentaries that I've made, I may be incorrect with all of them. Just because I have them doesn't mean they're correct. They're only correct if they can be logically validated, and if they can correspond with reality, and if they can be coherent ideas. Then we might have something. But if I miss any of those things, if I break any of the laws of logic, if any of my premises, if any of those are flawed with logical fallacies, then I'm incorrect, and I need to be corrected on those. So just because social media somebody says something that's quick and it's witty and it's cutting, doesn't mean they're right. Just because you ridicule someone for being wrong doesn't mean you're right. It just simply means they were wrong, and you're probably wrong as well. So what we need to do is we need to step away. I took time. I took 2 months to digest everything and chew on it and go through and think about these things. And so these ideas that I've been spouting off the day through stream of consciousness has just been things that I've been wrestling with. And I hadn't come to the mic yet because I wasn't ready to come to do the podcast, because I was still wrestling with them. And I didn't want to come with some premature, immature commentary for you to dismiss because you're like, this is just opinion, or to exacerbate some extreme philosophy that's not true, and fuel and embolden and empower someone to go, yeah, I have a right thought here. This is right. No. Your thought's probably wrong. It's probably a wrong thought, and you need to come to conclusions that. So I run a lot of this stuff by my wife, and her and I talk about a lot of this. And I had to stop listening to a lot of podcasts. I had to stop reading the internet because my mind was getting so full. I couldn't think. I couldn't literally give each of these topics more than 5 minutes of my time, and I couldn't come to a full conclusion on them. And I kept getting stumped and tripped up. And I said, okay, let's just take one of these at a time. Because when someone writes a book, they do research for years on one topic, and that one topic is in the core. It permeates their brain. That one topic just that's all they think about. They obsess about it. It's passion about it. It's obsession about that one thing, and they write this amazing book on it. But you can't write an amazing book, or you can't write an amazing thought on something you've thought about for 5 minutes and say, got it, I'm done. This is not a sitcom where you have 5 minutes of content and then jump to commercial and you're done. You solved it, 30 minutes, you've wrapped this thing up. No. It takes time to wrestle these things out, and we have to have the discipline to wrestle them. And so I took 2 months to wrestle some of this stuff out. And I haven't even talked about Ted Cruz, dropping out of the race, and how that crushed my heart, and how I feel like that really is bad for America. I'll do that some other time. But right now, just know that it's okay to step away from the radio. It's okay to put down Facebook. It's okay to not lust after that next piece of information, because here's what happens. Facebook is like crack. It really is. You can say, I'm not addicted to it or whatever. Try putting your phone down when you're watching TV. Try putting your phone down when a commercial comes on TV. Try when there's a lull in the conversation in the house of just sitting there and looking straight ahead, or just... Have you ever been around somebody in a car and not said anything for a half hour or an hour, and that's been okay because you were thinking about things? Have you ever done that? That's a true test of friendship. If you can ride in a car with someone for 30 minutes or an hour and not say anything, and you're both fine with it, and you're both okay, and nobody's on their phones, you're just occupying the same space, and you're having thoughts and they're having thoughts, and you guys don't talk about something, that's the true test of friendship. That if you can survive that, because that means that you guys are comfortable enough to have your own thoughts and to be in the same room with each other and not say anything. It used to be really easy. Now it's very hard. So you have to put down the phone, have to put down the social media. Don't get it. Just lay it down. Those arguments are going to be there. Now, some of them need to be answered quicker than others, and those have a little more importance attached to them, but they're going to be there. They've been going on for eons and eons. And there's a reason why atheism has not knocked Christianity out of the way, because the arguments have been going on since the beginning of time. They'll be there tomorrow. They'll be there the next day. Spend time with your family. Spend time with your thoughts. Spend time with God. Pray. Get your Bible out. And for those of you that know that, I do like the Mockingjay, and that was the Mockingjay symbol. That was not my alarm to go, but that was my wife texting me something. So for all you out there, I'm holding up 3 fingers. Roo! You're my girl. Anyway, thank you guys for listening today, and I hope you've had an amazing time, and that we have infused some good information here and some things that will help you in your daily life. And have a great day. Good night.